And we're live on Let Me Ask You This with Ben Bow, who I have not had the pleasure of meeting in person, but I saw some of your stuff on YouTube and saw you on Facebook and thought you'd be an interesting person to come to have on tonight.
Oh well, thank you for having me. I am intrigued to know what stuff that I was posting on Facebook
I can't remember whose thread it was in. It was definitely another comedian, I'm sure. That's probably how I was like, oh, maybe check you out. But so you've been doing comedy, you said, for 3 years now. Yep. When's the last show that you did before the quarantine?
What's the last show before the quarantine? Let me see here. I think it was a Nick's Comedy Stop. That was back in March, like middle of March. I think it was a Saturday at Nick's Comedy Stop in Boston.
Okay.
So I did that show. There was like a showcase. Probably did like 10 or 12 minutes on that show. So, but even back then, it was still funny to joke about the virus. It wasn't a thing yet. People were like, "This can't be real," and so we didn't know.
Right. So when did you start taking it seriously?
Well, because after that they canceled everything, right? I think it really hit me that it was serious when they canceled the NBA.
Me too.
I'm a basketball fan. I'm a basketball guy, and I didn't think it was serious. But then they canceled the NBA, and I was like, "This might be serious." Because when teams are willing to lose out on the money, that's when money's at stake and being cut off. I'm like, "This is real. Like this is it."
I was denying it. They were canceling NCAA tournament games, and I'm like, they're not going to cancel all of them. And then they canceled the St. John's game at halftime during the Big East tournament, and I'm like, all right, maybe now it's like a legit thing. And then the Rudy Gobert happened, where they were like, it kind of reminded me of the scene from, I don't know if you ever saw the movie The Karate Kid, where they come like running out of the tunnel, like the game was about to start, and the doctors are like sprinting to half court to tell them to stop the game.
Yeah, that was crazy. They stopped. One of those games was being played in the middle of the game. I think it was the Pelicans were playing that night, and they just stopped the game like that. And I was like, we're in for some shit. Like, this is going to get real. I honestly I was bracing for the worst. I thought we were going to be in like lockdown till September. I was expecting martial law. Like, I was going all over the place with this. So
I know. No, me too. So what do you think about the NBA coming back?
I'm excited. I'm as a hoops fan, I'm excited. I think one of the cool things about it is that they're doing they might do the play-in tournament, which I think will be really cool because now it's like all those teams that if you were like maybe they're like 4 or 5 games back or whatever didn't have a chance. It's like now they all have a chance. So people are going to be playing, and it's going to be a little bit kind of scrappy because everybody's rusty. Like they haven't touched the ball and played competitively in like 3 months, which is essentially like a full off season, right? Like most of the time, the finals end in June. Season starts back up around September, October. So they pretty much did like a full off season of just layoffs hanging out. So it's going to be interesting to kind of see it. But yeah, I'm glad that they're finishing out the season.
Yeah, I'm excited too. I'm interested. So have they said what's going to happen with regards to next season? Because usually the season's over by now, right? And they get started in October.
Mm-hmm. So next season's a whole nother thing,
right?
Because like right now they're trying to decide if like even like kids are going to be going back to school next year, or if because essentially, and you can't have pretty much if you're going to be putting like a clamp on events and public events, you can't just then have these same kids just be going to school like there's no problem, like can't do anything else, but your kids just all go to school and pass these diseases back and forth. So it's like I think based off of that, I don't think they're going to be able to do like a full season like they have now with like full arenas. I think maybe it'll become like a thing where they have to limit the seating, can only seat a certain amount if they're able to even do it at all like that. So to have even fans back, I don't know if they have fans back next season.
Yeah, I mean, I've been kind of following. There was like a point where I was kind of like, I don't even know if I miss sports. I'm like a huge fan, but I've been realizing how much stuff I'm getting done.
What have you been doing this whole time?
Well, let's see. I had Don. You know Don Zolo?
Yeah.
So I had Don on my show one night. This is like it's 31 days ago, a month ago, and he tells me about this thing called 75 Hard, which is this like diet program, but it's more like a mental program to like strengthen your mind. This thing has been encompassing my life now, where I'm I have to set a timer to drink a gallon of water a day. I'm doing 2 workouts a day. I'm reading books that I would never read before.
Man, how many days are you in?
Today's day 31.
day 31, and you're feeling.
I'm feeling great. I'm feeling good. There's a couple of days where I'm like, oh man, it's midnight and I still have to drink, half a gallon of water, and I'm on the treadmill drinking water while, and then I have to read half of, the book I have to read. So it's taken over my life a little bit, but it's pretty cool, that I'm actually doing it. But if sports were on, I don't know if I'd be able to do it because I'd be, what's going on right now. So
yeah, that's the thing. Is like all those things that I was always like, I'm too busy to do. I don't have time to do this. I'm doing comedy. I work. I don't have time for this. And then now I'm like, well, I got all the time in the world. Like I was eating out every single meal. Now I'm like cooking. I used to work and I was cooking meals and buying groceries. I went from being like back in college. I was an athlete in college, ran on the track team. And like, and so I was pretty in shape. I was pretty fit. And now I was losing it. I took like 2 steps down the stairs and I'd be like dying. And so I started getting back into running, started working out again.
Oh, nice.
So I've been able to do a little bit of that. So it has been good in that sense. I don't think that's going to change at all. I think even with the NBA comes back, it's like instead of watching all of these like lame Netflix shows, you can only be like, I can only watch this so much. I'll just substitute it with NBA whenever I have that time. So
right,
that's how I'm seeing it. But it'll be. What's up?
Are you were you a fan of the NBA in the 90s, or are you not old enough?
No, I watched a little bit in the 90s, but I'm a basketball person, so I know about the 90s hoops. There's
a big debate about when basketball was better, if it's now or if it's, the early 90s. And I'm a 90s guy because I like the physicality, but I'll tell you what, when I was watching the Jordan documentary, I don't know if you caught any of it.
Yeah, I watched all of it.
I was shocked at how low the scores were in some of those games.
Well, here's the thing about 90s basketball. So, one, you had guys that were like MJ, guys that were really good transcendent talents, right? But in terms of the transition of the game, I don't think players were just individually as skilled on the whole as they are now. So when you are like a Michael Jordan, it was a lot easier to stand out because like you had the guys at the top, but like outside of that, the rest of the guys in general were pretty bad. I mean, you had guys like Jed Buechler was getting time. Like you have a lot of these guys like so it's kind of different to see how the games change. But like now you have these kids that have been playing basketball every day of their life, AAU travel teams. They've been playing all the time. So like the skill level, they all have personal trainers from the time. So I think the overall skill level has risen. I think which is why it's harder to be like a transcendent talent now because these people are like, you can't do anything that not everybody else is doing now, So it's a little different in that sense, but you still get your Zions.
Yeah, I would be interested in seeing. I mean, I'd love to see the matchup of like the '96 Bulls, versus like the Golden State Warriors. It'd be fun, right? I mean, because who's Jordan? We have this debate all the time. Me and my friends. It's like, who would Steph Curry guard? I mean, Jordan's 6'6". Like he would do whatever he wants. Right.
I mean, but here's the thing about the NBA back then, right? You didn't have to play defense the same way because one of the things that I don't think a lot of people account for is Michael Jordan got like all of his buckets from the mid-range, right? Michael Jordan, but for all intents and purposes, is the king of the mid-range jump shot.
Right.
Because of the rules back then, illegal defense rules, you had to play pretty much straight up man up. It was me, you, or we're sending a full-out double team that you could see coming a mile away. That was pretty much your options for defense. And now you have teams that people are able to play zones, you're able to kind of sag things around, so the paint gets clogged. The way Michael Jordan played, if you were playing in the style that we have now with these rules, I would find it really hard for him to do that, to play that same style. So it'd be interesting to see how his game would have developed. I'm not saying Jordan wouldn't have been a monster. I'm saying his game would have been different. I think his game would have expanded to the three, a lot more drives, a lot more pull-up three-pointers, and it would have been interesting to see that. But I don't know. People say the Bulls would blow him out, but Steph Curry is on a whole different being. He is the best shooter in NBA history.
Wow.
Of all time.
I don't know about that, but
name somebody better. I will denounce this argument in 2 seconds. Name somebody who's a better shooter.
I'm going to say Larry. I think Larry Bird is, and I'll tell you why. He didn't know what a three-pointer was until he was 22 years old. They didn't exist.
Okay.
So he grew up. So like Steph Curry grew up shooting threes. Larry Bird, he didn't have to because he didn't know that they existed. So wouldn't it make more sense to practice coming into the as close as you can get to the hoop?
I'm not
The
saying
same thing with Jordan, right? Because I think he shot like 30% from three, and I'm like, if he played today, he would have had the luxury of knowing what it was when he was 7.
that's what people say, but
Oh, come
everyone else that plays today knows what a three-pointer is as well. It's not like Michael Jordan didn't know threes. They were shooting threes in Jordan's time. Like he was late 90s. Like people were shooting three-pointers. You had three-point specialists when Jordan was playing. You had big man like
not
Vin
like
Baker
today,
shooting
not like
threes.
today, not like today
He
though.
was a three-point specialist. I'm not saying it was like this, but don't
Yeah,
pretend that like Michael Jordan would have just became Steph Curry's ability to shoot a three-pointer
yeah.
is extraordinary. If you look at the numbers, I think Kirk Goldberry on ESPN wrote an article about this. He said essentially any three-pointer by Steph Curry is the best shot the Warriors can get at any time. And he showed that the numbers that for every three-pointer, like Steph takes the points per point that he gets per shot of three-pointer, because he's never shot under 40% from three-pointer. Never.
No, he's a great shooter.
Never
I just
shot under 40%. Like people
right.
didn't even shoot that for a career. And the volume that he shoots, he's shooting three-pointers like people are shooting mid-range. Like, if you would have taken those shots back then, coaches would have benched you. Steph Curry is transcendent.
Absolutely. Are you an NFL guy?
I mean, I follow football a little bit. Like, I'm not
Okay.
super big on the NFL, but I mean, I keep up with sports in general. I'm just a sports guy. I used to play
Yeah.
all the sports back in the day, and so it's kind of like ingrained. So
I do think it's interesting how you have a lot of guys that, depending on when they played, like, obviously Kaepernick is in the news a lot right now. And I was just reading an article about in 2015, the first time that he got benched in 2015 when he wasn't playing great was when they got a new offensive coordinator. He ran for 4,000 yards in college. If he played today at like 24 years old, he'd be a top 3 quarterback in the league because of the ways that they run the offense. And I do wonder in the NBA if there's guys who just played in the wrong era.
oh, absolutely. Like, there's plenty of guys. For example, okay, so here's one that gets underrated: Steve Nash. I think Steve Nash was the beginning of this era. But if Steve Nash would have played like 10 years after he did in this
Right.
area of chucking up three-pointers, he would have been shooting like Steph Curry numbers from three. I would have been intrigued to see how his game would have translated. Tony Kukoc is another one. He was
Oh
like
yeah.
Luka Doncic before Luka Doncic, right?
Right.
Like he was doing those things back then when you weren't supposed to be 6'10" playing point, dropping dimes. Like that's what he was doing back then. So I think there's a lot of guys like that were ahead of their times. Even if you go back any further, like Pistol Pete, I wish that dude would have played it in the era like today. Yo, Pistol Pete pulling up from they said he averaged 44 points a game at LSU shooting two-pointers. Like, who does that?
I know.
And they said like, and they calculated, they've done this, they calculated like the area that his shots came from. A lot of them were from 3-point range. They said if they would have had the three-pointer in his time, just from where he was shooting, like the shots that he already took, he would have been scoring like 66 points a game. Like he was doing stuff that behind the back and between the legs that refs used to call travels because they didn't know what it was. They're like, no, that can't. What, like the Rajon Rondo move that Rondo used to do where he'd like put it behind his back on the
I
pass
love
break?
that move. Yeah.
Yeah, like the little fake pass thing that he does. Pistol Pete was doing that back before, and people were like, no, he had to have traveled. That's you can't juke somebody like that. That's a travel. So it's like there's a lot of guys like that. Bernard King is another one. He played above the rim in the 70s. Come on. Wilt Chamberlain is my favorite player that I would love to see in this era because the stories you hear about Wilt are so ridiculous. I would just have to see it.
Like, well, wasn't he like 7 inches taller than everybody else?
Well, that's okay. See, not 7 inches taller than he was 7'1", so he was a couple inches taller than ever. Like he was 7'3". Okay, so maybe 7'2" or whatever, 7'1", somewhere between there, depending on who you ask. But here's the thing about Wilt. So it's the stories that you hear people tell about him that blow my mind. Like they said that so Arnold Schwarzenegger used to have a gym in LA, right? Arnold Schwarzenegger, back when he was bodybuilding in the 80s, late 70s, late 70s, that's when Wilt played for the Lakers in the 70s. And Arnold was back when he was bodybuilding. He said like the strongest, and this is Arnold Schwarzenegger telling this, by the way. And he's like, the strongest guys used to come into the lift. They'd be doing like gym, like stuff, like they'd be doing tricep stuff, like 130 pounds, the strong guys. Arnold's like, I was coming in, I'm doing like 150 on these like tricep machines. It's like Will came in and was doing like 170 on these things. And this is like Arnold. He's like, he used to just pick me up and just like throw me around. Like, what was that strong? And then you hear crazy stories of like he used to race Jim Brown and beat Jim Brown in races.
Really?
Yeah. Like if you listening to people tell stories about Wilt, it's like they're telling folk stories about stuff that he used to do just because he could. And I would just love to see. Like one year, he led the league in assists because they said he couldn't pass. So he just decided he was going to lead the league in assists. Who does that? So, like, just to see somebody that had the physical prowess that he did in a day like this, I would just want to see what it's capable of. That's a character right there as well.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what. The one thing that I've noticed about no matter what field you're in, if it's basketball, comedy, golf, right, the best are the people that work the hardest. I mean, look at Jordan, right? In that documentary where he talks about how they lost to the Pistons and he went right to the weight room to work out so he can get stronger so that he can be more physical. Like that's the mentality that I don't think a lot of athletes have today. And I don't know why. I don't know what the reasoning is, but even Tiger Woods, like there'll never be another Tiger Woods because he was obsessed with golf. The best golfers today, you know what they do? They win a tournament and they go on a boat trip and go hang out with their friends. Like Tiger didn't do that. He went back to work the next day.
Yeah, I think it is to a certain extent. But I will say I think the mental edge. Michael Jordan, I think the one thing that Michael had was a mental edge on every other player that he played against. Not so more like a working and physical edge. Like once you get to the NBA levels, like all these dudes are all 6. What's the difference between Kobe Bryant and J.R. Smith? J.R. Smith could have been Kobe Bryant. Like they're both 6'6", 20, super athletic, can shoot from anywhere. Like they're similar body types, but why isn't J.R. Smith that? Because when J.R. Smith lived in Denver, J.R. Smith was at the club. He was drinking brews.
Yeah.
I think there is that to a certain extent, but there are some limitations on just what you're able to do. Like Kyle Korver, for example. Kyle Korver's been in the league for like 40 years. Dude played with Will. He was there in the beginning of time. And the dude still, for all intents and purposes, works his ass off to stay in shape at 40, to shoot like he does and run around. But Kyle Korver could never be Michael Jordan. No matter how hard he worked, he could just be Kyle Korver, which is you're kind of long, got a little bit of athleticism. So, I mean, I think there is a certain extent of that. Like, people forget that even before he was Michael Jordan was the best player in the NCAA for like 3 years.
Right.
Like, it wasn't like he just came into the NBA and outworked everybody. Like, he was already better than them at that point. Michael Jordan was the first guy jumping from the free throw line before everybody else. Like, he was – you can't coach that. You can't just be like, yo, jump from the free throw line. There's no coach that's going to have you do that. Like, you can't teach that. Michael Jordan was a super freak. He was just a maniacal worker as well. He's the rare combination of that maniacal when that hard, like the natural talent just meets that maniacal work ethic, and then you get a Michael Jordan. And that's very rare in any sport.
Yeah. So who are some of the guys that you like today?
I mean, I love watching LeBron play. Some of the passes that I know people in Boston here, you guys don't think too kindly of Bron, but I think that for whatever you think about Bron, he has been, whether you like him or you hate him, he's one of the guys in the NBA that can get that ticks the meter, you know. So he's done that. Year 17, 35 years old, still balling out of control. That it's impressive. I'm a big fan. I've been a big Brown fan, but being from Colorado, Nikola Jokic. Can we give my boy Nikola Jokic some love? That dude, his game is unorthodox, like to say the least. Who else plays the game through their center? And he's a guy I love watching. He's a freak. He
went late in the draft too.
Yeah, I think he was
definitely in the 20s, I think.
Yeah, I thought he might have even been a second round pick. Like people.
I remember the Celtics took Kelly Olynyk that draft over Giannis and Jokic.
Yeah,
I mean a lot of teams passing those two, but the fact they took Kelly Olynyk over those two, I can't get over it.
Well, yeah, Giannis went number 14, I believe. He wasn't even a lottery pick, or maybe 16. And Giannis, that was the steal of all drafts. That dude is he's
unbelievable.
I am intrigued to see Giannis because I think that Giannis, he's one of those people that has that maniacal work ethic. And I think he's going to develop, as his career grows, I think he's going to develop into a serviceable shooter because he doesn't even have to be a good shooter. He just has to be serviceable to where when he's on the three, you have to step out and then he just takes a step and dunks from wherever he wants, and you can't stop that.
Right. Do you think he's the best player in the league right now?
In the league,
I think it's kind of. I think it's close.
It is close. He's got to show me something. He's got to win something. He's got to pull his team to be able to at least come out of the East and win the Eastern Conference Finals. He's got to show me that, because until he does that, then I can't say he's the best player in the league.
Yeah.
Seeing how he plays this season, I know it's going to be weird but everyone's got the same circumstances, so it's not like he's at a disadvantage. So I'm intrigued to see. But Giannis has to. He's trending that way though. But there's that man Kevin Durant coming back at some point, and that dude.
I literally have no respect for LeBron or Durant.
Oh my gosh! Listen, you don't have to have respect for them to admit that they're amazing.
It's hard for me to respect somebody who's up 3-1 on a team and then goes and joins that 73-win team when Durant did that to the Warriors. It's so hard for me to respect that. That's like,
you don't have to respect him to admit that he's a great basketball player.
He's a good basketball player. I just don't think he has the heart that other guys do when it comes to wanting to win.
I mean, that's obvious because it's Kevin Durant. He's always been big, soft like ice cream. He's not.
I know.
Here's the thing. He
could be the best player of all time. I mean, he really could be. He's 6'11" and can shoot better than
Kevin Durant's 7 foot. I used to when I lived in Colorado. I worked for the Nuggets. I used to go to the game.
Oh, really?
Kevin Durant is taller than Steven Adams. He was the taller than Serge Ibaka. The dude, yeah, he's 6'11", 7 foot, and he's 7 foot in shoes for sure. He's like 6'11" standing foot. He said he only listed himself at 6'9" because he didn't want people to make him a power forward. He just wanted to play small forward, so he listed himself at 6'9". But he's a legitimate almost 7 footer.
Isn't it amazing that wait, he went number 2 in the draft behind Greg Oden, right?
Yeah, Greg Oden.
That's unbelievable. It's amazing to see these guys sometimes because I'm a huge college basketball fan. At least I used to be when UConn actually had a team worth rooting for. But the fact when you see some of these guys, like remember when Melo single-handedly took Syracuse to the championship, and then you see a guy like Durant, you're like, how did they not win? Or even Shaq, like when Shaq was in, how did they just not steamroll through the whole tournament when they had Shaq?
Well, first of all, Shaq's team around him was garbage.
I know. Well, yeah, of course.
One time out, Carmelo. That team at Syracuse was good. Not just Carmelo. They had Carmelo, but that team was good. Between
they had, they always had. Who they have? Was it Devendorf or McNamara?
They had both of them.
Oh, they had both
of them. Yeah, Devendorf was there. McNamara was the point guard. Hakeem Warwick, he played in the league for a couple of years.
Oh, all right. They had Warwick that year? Okay.
Yeah. They had some good players on that team. It was a solid team. And they had one other guy, I believe, that also played in the league from that team.
Yeah.
Because they beat that team. The Kansas team they beat in the finals had Kirk Heinrich, Nick Collison.
Yeah,
there was a good team.
Heinrich was in the league for like 30 years.
Yeah, Nick Collison's still in the league, and I don't know how. I don't know how he's still in the league. Nick Collison's still there. What? Yeah, so that Melo team was good. I think it's also because they're not as skilled as they are in college and the NBA as well. So it's harder to take over because like you can play a zone or like a box and one or a triangle. Right. You can do all these exotic things to shut down one guy. But that's also how I knew Steph Curry was going to be really good in the NBA. But a lot of people were kind of worried, like, is he too small?
I loved Steph Curry when he was at Davidson.
Yeah, there was no one else. The thing about Steph Curry is there was no one else on his team at Davidson. It was literally Steph Curry and no one else. And
you know who? Wait,
getting 30 points a game.
Johnny Flynn got drafted before Steph Curry.
Yeah,
I think he went number 5 overall to Minnesota.
Ricky, wasn't it? Who else got drafted that year? Wasn't it?
Ricky something, right? Ricky, I forgot who it was.
Yeah, I know Johnny Flynn. There was someone else that got drafted before him that there was some head scratchers as well. Yeah, but that's because this drafting is an exact. It's not a science.
Well, they're afraid to take guys from small schools for whatever reason.
Well, and Steph Curry had those ankle issues, so they weren't sure he was going to hold up.
Oh, right.
Yeah, because they're always afraid to take guys from small schools, which I think is silly because there's so much less parity in college basketball nowadays. Because again, it's all the same kids that have been playing each other from AAU all the time. So unless you have your Zions and your Jaws, which I think I'm not surprised at all by Ja Morant playing the way he is, coming from a mid-major as well. That dude he's a freak. He's an absolute beast.
Do you think Zion's going to be the best player in the league at some point, or what?
I mean,
You know, he reminds me of Robert Traylor with the skills of like Michael Jordan, I think. I mean, the guy is unstoppable.
He is right now, but people are gonna. You can't do the same thing forever. Right now he's bullying people, right? He's a bully, and he can be because he weighs 285 pounds.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So here's my questions about. So the questions I have about Zion obviously are very simple. Can 285 pounds hold up over an 82 game season? To be the best player in the NBA, you have to be playing in the NBA. Like, say what you want about LeBron, but that dude doesn't miss a lot of time. There's a reason he is what he is, right? Can Zion play 82 games a season for 5-10 years in a row at 285 pounds? There's a reason nobody else is doing it except for Boban, and he's like 7'6" to carry that.
Right.
It's like there's a pounding your body takes, and you're not playing college basketball, and even had injuries then. You're not playing when you have that, 30 games a season or whatever they play, 35, 40 games now. You're playing double that all the time. So can his body hold up? That's my biggest question for Zion, I think. The second thing on the court is at some point people are going to start figuring out ways to kind of hold him, whether it's a double team or slow him down or frustrate him, whether you're sending a double team, whether you're guarding him a certain type of way. I think right before there was a break, there was a game where they played the Dallas Mavericks. And I remember Maxi Kleber. Yeah, I said that right. Maxi Kleber frustrated Zion for the better part of 3/4 of the game. Frustrated Zion and got him into turnovers. And I'm like, that's Maxi Kleber. And you've only played 10 games. If you keep doing the same things, people will figure you out. So I want to see how Zion's game develops in terms of how does he develop a serviceable shooter? Can he maybe find some different moves, work with his back to the basket a little bit more? It'll be intriguing to see how he develops. But can he be the best player? He has the potential, absolutely. But
yeah. Well, that's funny. When he got drafted, I'm a big sports card collector.
Mm-hmm.
And the Zion cards were already skyrocketed before they even came out, right? And I'm like, well, if I have to, you have to treat it like the stock market. And to me, I thought that he was kind of an injury risk, so I pretty much put my money that I invest in NBA cards all on Morant because they were underpriced and he wasn't getting the same publicity. And it looks like it's starting to pay off. I mean, I'd love to have a Zion rookie, of course, but they're just it's like $10,000 to buy one.
Really?
Wow. Well, Zion, yeah, one Zion sold for $100,000 last year.
Already?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. He literally could break. I mean, he could break his ankle and never play ever again, and the card's worthless.
Right, that's a bold strategy. It's a very bold investment strategy. Let's keep our fingers crossed.
You're trying to find athletes that got drafted either late or that aren't getting talked about from small schools, and you invest a couple $100 and you hope that they become good, and then you can do pretty well. But so that's why I kind of follow every sport except for hockey. I just can't get into it, but I wish I could.
Hockey's fine. I used to be a big hockey person. I used to play hockey as a kid, actually. I grew up in Colorado, so the Colorado Avalanche were really good before the first lockout. So I used to love Peter Forsberg, Joe Sakic. Yeah. They had that team back there in the 90s that was winning Stanley Cups. So I used to play hockey in the street, and I got pretty decent.
That's funny because when Ray Bourque went out there, right, to win okay, so when he won the cup, I used to, because I moved to Boston from New York, and one of the jokes that I wrote was you can't tell me Boston's a great sports town. They literally had a parade for a guy who won a championship on another team. They had a parade for Ray Bourque after he won the cup in Colorado, which I thought was such a pathetic move.
That's a very weak move, by the way. Super weak move. I never
imagine it the Yankees doing that for a player that they traded away. I couldn't, I just could not imagine that happening.
Well, I think also because they traded him away. I will say though, when Boston did that, they traded him to the Avalanche specifically, so we had a good chance of winning. Yeah. It was Ray, you've put in so many years here.
Yeah, they love Ray Bourque, of course.
We suck real bad, and you're not going to win anything here, bro. We love you so much. We'll give you to the Avalanche for free and help those guys. And they straight up did, too. That team was nasty that year. They had Peter Forsberg, Sandis Ozolins, Adam Deadmarch, Joe Sakic, Ray Bourque, Adam Blake. We had Rob Blake. We were fucking up everybody that year. Patrick Waller.
That was a great team.
That was a great year.
That was I do remember that moment when Bork was hoisting the cup up. I was living in Connecticut, and I'm like, that's a great sports moment. The guy waited his whole life to win one.
Yeah, that's a way to go out. Like who do you think had Jordan had the best retirement till he came back, right?
I know. Why did he ruin it? He ruined it.
Because he's Michael Jordan. That's the thing about you love Michael Jordan. The thing about that made Michael Jordan the best is the same thing that makes him like the worst at everything else.
Right.
Is like he doesn't know when to quit. Like, how can you know when to quit? Because he never quit. Like, that was his whole career. He never quit. He never gave up. He never stopped believing that he could win. And now, when he's doing fucked up shit and people are like, hey, Mike, it ain't it, Chief. It's like, I can do this. Like, just
like when he drafted Kwame Brown.
Kwame Brown.
Right? Didn't he draft Kwame Brown number 1 overall?
Kwame. R.I.P. to Kwame. Oh, man. I forgot about Kwame, yeah. I mean, but look at the Hornets now.
Hey, well, I guess I don't have to be anymore, but there was a point where I was like, if they have Kemba and Jeremy Lamb and they trade for Shabazz Napier, like I literally might move to Charlotte and just become a Hornets fan because I live and breathe UConn. I mean, I love, being when you're from Connecticut, you have nothing else to root for except for UConn basketball.
You have the women's team though; they're good.
Yeah,
right?
We still got the women, and they dominate. Although not lately, but
it's fun for the women.
It's all over. I mean, it's all over.
One game, and you're like, they can't dominate anymore.
Once they got kicked out of the Big East, that was it for UConn basketball.
They're not in the Big East anymore.
No, when they broke up, they had the Catholic schools went to the Big East, and the UConn went to the American Conference, I think, where it's like them, SMU. I think Memphis might be in there. They couldn't play the MSG anymore, which was a big draw. The Big East tournament, you get to play at MSG, and now they don't have that. So, who wants to go there? So they have a lot of recruiting problems,
and they have a lot of coaching problems too. The coaching carousel. Yeah. The Kevin Ollie thing. They got rid of Kevin Ollie now, right?
Right. Yep.
Yeah. How did you think about Kevin? Was Kevin Ollie the coach when they won in 2013, or was that still Calhoun?
No, I think that was Kevin. He won it. Yeah. So Kevin Ollie won one.
Yeah, he won one with the Shabazz, right?
Yeah, it was Calhoun's team, but Kevin Ollie. I mean, he was basically the recruiter, right? All the tournaments that they won.
Kevin Ollie, he was on Calhoun's staff for a while. He was like being groomed, and I think he was doing a lot of the recruiting. So a lot of those guys came there with a lot of a lot of Kevin Ollie stuff, which is cool for him. I'm glad he won one at least before he got.
So when did you move to Boston?
So I'm out like in the Worcester area. I've been out here for about 3 years now.
Okay.
Yeah.
From Colorado.
Yeah. So I was living in Colorado. I graduated college. I was living downtown Denver. I got fired from another job. I was on a pretty bad streak there. And I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do. So I went abroad for a while, worked on some cruise ships, lived on some islands and stuff like that. Yeah. So I did that for a couple of years, and then I moved here in early 2017. I moved to Mass. And then I was only going to be here for 6 months, but one thing led to another. Comedy happened, and 3 years later, here we are.
Nice, man. So what made you want to get into comedy?
Oh, man. I've always loved comedy. I remember watching Def Comedy Jam as a kid and seeing Chris Tucker was on there. Bernie Mac used to be my favorite. All those guys.
Thank you all for coming out. God bless you. Good night.
Yeah. No, right. I didn't even watch those. I used to watch. I've ever seen just a lot of the Def Comedy Jam tapes they used to have. Yeah. And they had Bernie Mac come out there with the "I ain't scared of you motherfuckers." That used to be my shit. I love that.
My favorite person that ever to go on there was Bill Bellamy. I don't know if you remember him.
I remember Bill Bellamy. Yeah, he was in the
90s. He had this bit about his car alarm. He's like, I want to get a car alarm. He's like, his car gets stolen and calls him up in the middle of the night. He's like, Bill, you gotta come get me. It's just such a great bit. That's when obviously Bill Bellamy was hugely famous back then.
Yeah.
I mean, I love Def Comedy.
Yeah, that was it. And then I got into Dave Chappelle when I was probably in middle school at some point, and that was the end of it. I love Chappelle, and then it just so I've always wanted to do it. And then when I graduated college, I was I didn't have a job. I didn't have anything to do, so I started doing open mics in downtown Denver, and I probably did that for like 6 months or so, a couple months, and then I started working, so I kind of cut it off, and then I didn't do comedy again for 4 years. But while I was here, and then when I moved here, I was like, well, fuck it, I'm not doing anything else. Let me start doing comedy again, and then it just kind of stuck this time.
Nice.
But
So what
just
do you
thought it could.
what is your set like? What type of stuff do you typically talk about?
It's a great question. I don't know. I don't try to limit myself in terms of whatever I find to just be funny at the time. I talk a lot about like my family because I'm originally from Africa,
Yep.
so just there's like a lot of cultural differences and funny things that happen. And my dad's one of my favorite subjects just because my dad is the most unintentionally funny person I know. He doesn't like try to be funny. He's very serious, which makes it even better because he's like such a serious person, but he does like the most outlandish things like that he thinks are serious, and it's so fucking funny. Like I can't
I
say.
love the opening joke that I saw that you did when you
Oh
come out with like the accent.
yeah, that joke actually was because people kept butchering my name. So like Ben Bosunga, people would read it and they'd just be like Bossa, and they would just like say it all crazy, or they would notice it was African and try too hard to like get too African in it. So they would, and so one night I just went on stage and like the dude had just been like, he was reading my name, this motherfucker's, and he said something about like, this is definitely some African dude. Like, oh, I can't even pronounce this name. And he talked about how he couldn't pronounce my name and he just butchered it. And I get on stage and I was just like, all right, well, let me just fuck with everybody. I'm like, good evening. I just played into it and people went off. Like the whole room just exploded. And after that, I was like, yeah, I can do that. That works. So that's how that kind of came about. It was just mostly because my last name was butchered very heavily. I've been called like Ben Wakanda. I've been called like Bojangles one time. It gets out of hand.
So do you have like because I grew up in the New York comedy scene, every comedian up there, it's observational comedy, right?
Right. Yeah. But notice how.
What's that?
Like, do you ever notice?
Yeah.
Right. Kind of thing. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's funny because like every like Boston has a very specific style, like Boston comedy, like it's a lot of like deadpan kind of like guys just standing up at the mic in a monotone voice, kind of trying to say clever stuff, Like
I
yeah,
don't know
it's
if
like
I ever noticed that, but you're right.
it's a very like because coming from like because my foray into comedy was like I'd never seen like that style. I'm watching like Def Jam and I'm seeing Bernie Mac. I ain't scared of you motherfuckers, and Chris Tucker all now, and Dave Chappelle kind of doing his own thing. And then I come to like Boston and everyone was like, oh yeah, no, and they all have that same kind of monotone style, and I'm just like, okay. So kind of trying to navigate between what works here and what works other styles. It's just interesting where you go, how there's different styles. It's usually whoever's like the hottest in that scene, kind of like that dictates the style that everyone of the comedy is kind of doing right now.
I can see that. That isn't. See, I try to do the opposite. I want to be like the unique individual that people are going to remember, right?
Right. I mean, that's the idea. You want to stand out. For me, I just try to do. I don't know. I just try to do what I think is funny first and foremost. I never want to do jokes just because like or maybe like say something I don't believe in or something I think is like bullshit just to get a laugh. Like I want to do something that one I think is funny, maybe I think is real, or just I don't know, whatever it is. But I want it to be like to be specific to me, not just like a cookie cutter idea that everyone's doing.
Right.
So because of that, that's why I think I talk a lot about my experiences, kind of like the things that I've been through in my life, and try to throw a twist on those things, just because no one can to make a story about you. You know what I'm saying? No one else can copy a joke about something that like happened to you and an experience that you had. So
right,
in the sense of trying to do that, I try to keep it that way.
Yeah, see that right. So I had a joke. It was about people that refer to their kids' ages in months. And like, I do like the whole joke. I'm like, oh, I'm 360 months old, whatever. And then George Carlin did the joke. And so obviously I can't tell that joke anymore, but it was one of those things where I'm like, well, it's kind of an easy joke to do, but he did it. So I'm never going to do it again. But that's when I started putting myself, telling stories about myself into the joke. because then people can't take, then they can't take it from you.
Yeah, and it's the kind of the worst because like if somebody like George Carlin or like Bill Burr or something like
Right.
touches on a joke that, or even maybe you've never seen it or parallel thinking, whatever has you, but that joke is dead to you. It's a wrap.
Absolutely.
It's no longer you own nothing. It is a wrap. So
right.
From that perspective, it's kind of like, all right. But if I tell a joke about me working with kids and chocolate milk, like Bill Burr can't tell that joke. It never happened to him, So
right.
because of that, then you can find your own kind of thing. So definitely, I think I've always just tried to do that for that reason.
Now, do you get nervous before you go on stage?
I used to. I used to get real nervous. When I first started doing open mics, even, my shirt would be, sweating through, my pits down here. I'd be, hyperventilating, all nervous and stuff. And then I get on stage and try to just be cool. But I used to get super nervous. But once I started, really going in, I was trying to do pretty much, a set every day of the year, essentially.
Yeah, good for you.
Yeah, so the last couple of years, I've gotten up over 300 sets a year.
Really?
Yeah. So last year,
that's what I'm talking about with that Michael Jordan mentality.
Well, this is the thing. I love doing comedy, man. And so any night I could get out, and I think that's one of the things about this quarantine that I miss so much is I can't get out on stage. Before the quarantine happened, I think March 14th was we were counting this the other day. March 14th, I believe, was the 73rd day of the year, and at that point, I had done 75 sets so far.
Really?
Yeah, and I didn't even do any sets the first 2 weeks of January either. So I was kind of a little bit behind. But that's how much I like to go out and how many sets I like to do a week, double-digit sets every week. So for me, it's when you get in that rhythm of going out every night and you're on stage every night, you start feeling a rhythm, your jokes start changing a little bit, and you get comfortable. You're no longer nervous. After you've done this and told the same set for 30 days in a row, after the 31st time, you're like, yeah, no, I think I'm fine. I'm not going to sweat this one out a little bit. And so that was kind of my perspective. I was like, I really love doing this, but I can't be hyperventilating and sweating through every shirt every time I go up. So I just have to do this enough times till I reach a comfort level to where I'm not worried about sweating and forgetting my jokes, to where then I can be comfortable on stage and start being oh, maybe somebody reacted or I think of something. Because when you're calm and confident on stage, then you can kind of get in that zone where you're okay, somebody did something or somebody said something, you can kind of play off of that and you can riff a little bit. You're just a little bit more loose versus when all you're thinking about is remember my jokes, don't fuck this up. You're just kind of in a straight line, just reciting from your brain. It's at two different levels. And I think just going over time and just keep going. So that kind of helped me with that. I used to get really nervous, but I'll probably start getting nervous again now because it's been so long before I've been on a stage. I'm like, what am I doing here? I don't even know if I remember what my act is, but
yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, the one thing that I know about audiences is that they're definitely rooting for you. They don't show up to not laugh.
Except for Rhode Island. Rhode Island, they show up, they're like, oh, fuck this motherfucker. I cannot wait to just boo him. Yeah. But yeah, you're right for the most part. If they're coming out to a comedy show, they want to laugh.
Yeah, so they're already in your corner, especially now, man. I think the audiences are going to be great. They're going to be laughing just because they're out of the house.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think that, because then we were talking about this the other day with a friend, and I was like, even though the capacities are lower, I think the people that you're going to find at the shows, they're going to be people that want to be at a comedy club. They want to hear some jokes. They want to have a good time. And some comics that went on tour, I think they opened up some clubs in Utah. I think Jeff did a couple of those shows, was one of the ones that got booked on there. And he was on a podcast talking about how they're the hottest rooms that he's ever had, had these great shows. I think Brad Williams did another one, and he's like, these crowds are so hot. They're just he's like, I've never felt anything like that. These rooms were just so hot. These people were just waiting to laugh. They just wanted to laugh at everything just because. So we'll see how that plays out.
That's pretty cool. Yeah. Have you ever done shows in New York at all?
I haven't gotten up to New York yet. So my thing for comedy, I know it's kind of ass backwards. Most people, they'll be try to get out as much as possible. So I never spend a lot of time emailing bookers or asking to do spots on shows, like that. Even for my first year, about doing open mics, I don't even think I did a show. I just did open mics for a straight year before And then, like, at some point, somebody put me on a show, and then someone saw me on one show, put me on
Yep.
another thing, and someone else saw me somewhere else and put me on this thing and said, "Hey, work with this person." And that's just kind of how it's built. So hopefully, if someone's like, "Hey, do a show in New York," I'll be in New York.
Well,
So
the only reason I asked is because you mentioned doing a show every night, and it's such a different scene compared to here. Because in New York, you actually have like people that are in the audience looking for a comedy show, whereas some of the shows in New England are, if you're going to open mic in New England, it's like 25 other comedians in the audience, right?
yeah, that
Or
is
in
the
New York,
idea.
it's not like that. It's New York, it's like 12 comics, and because they're all bringer shows, so now you have like 60 people in the audience that are there because they want to laugh too, so it's like an actual audience, but it's just so much different.
Yeah, I think it is, and it's definitely I can definitely start telling a little bit, because I would say like in the previous years, the ratio, the ratio of terms of like sets I would do that were open mics versus shows. So like previously, I would say for every 10 shows I did, it would probably be like maybe three, maybe four shows, and the other 6 or 7 would be open mics. Um, and then recently, like around this year, I would say because of all the spots that I was doing at a lot of the clubs that we had started working with, I would probably say that ratio changed to be more like for every 10 shows I did, it was about 6 or 7 shows to about 3 or 4 open mics. And that shift is significant because you start noticing a lot of the things that you're talking about, like open mic audiences versus actual audiences,
Right.
and kind of doing that. But the downside is when you have open mic audiences and like you're at an open mic, you can try anything, you
That's
can try
true.
whatever, you can freestyle. And so for me, I would like if I show up to this open mic, I'll do 5 minutes of doo doo every time I'm here just to throw shit on the wall and see what sticks. I didn't
Yeah.
mind doing that. Some people like, oh, well, if you don't have anything funny, like why are you at the open mic or whatever? I'm like, I don't know if it's funny until I try it, and I don't know how it feels until I try it on stage. So whatever. But when you're like doing shows, I think somebody brings you to a comedy club or brings you to like a show with however many people in there and you're getting paid and you're like, well, this isn't the time to throw shit on a wall and hope it sticks, like
Yeah.
that's so I think there's good and bad to both, but kind of figuring out how to navigate that. For me, it's just like the more I can do, the better. Like there's no show, let's go do an open mic. If I have 2 shows tonight, fine. If I can do a show and hit an open mic, cool, let's do that too. But just keep it going and do more. And the New York part is kind of cool because being able to do like 4 or 5 shows in a night would be crazy.
Yeah, I mean, they have such a huge advantage there because just the walk by traffic, people just walking by, they're like, oh, something to do. When you go to New York, you're like, let's do something.
Right? Yeah, that's what
Everyone's a
everyone's
tourist.
looking to do.
Everyone's a tourist, and the comedy clubs are on the streets, and you just like, oh, let's go to the show. So like, whereas here you have to actually drive. You gotta get in your car. You gotta drive to one. So the audiences are different. It's probably the same. I've never been to LA. I mean, I'm sure it's the same thing out there.
Yeah, LA is also very spread out, so everyone's got to like drive out there.
Oh, really?
Like, yeah, LA is super spread out. Like you can't. There's no
Okay.
public transportation, and it's not as. It doesn't seem like it's very populated, but it doesn't. Besides the traffic, it doesn't seem as like even like the Comedy Store. Like it's not like in like a downtown area where you can just like get foot traffic walking by. Like it's
Right.
super out of the way. So it's like a little out of the way from the downtown. So LA, I would probably say is it's weird because like I think in general, like I would say Boston probably has a better comedy scene than LA in
Oh,
terms
that's
of like
interesting.
if you're a newer comic. Obviously, if you're like established and you can get into those venues there with all those people, but the actual scene in terms of like if you're an open micer and you're trying to get better at comedy in terms of having opportunities, like there you have to wait for places hours and sign up and pay to get stage time and all sorts of stuff. And
Right.
so I think for people that aren't established that are trying to start comedy, I think starting in a city like Boston is optimal.
Yeah. No, I could see that. Are there any subjects that you won't touch on when you're on stage, or?
No, I mean, so it's kind of different for me. I personally am just kind of like in general, I try to keep it to as much as myself, so that doesn't get like I don't try to purposely be like go down dark subjects to just be like, oh, I'm trying to be edgy. Um, I did try to do a bit about school shootings and
Oh
segregation.
man.
Yeah, you're right. You heard it, and then you were just like, "Oh shit!" And I will say, you hear that and you're like, this joke is so fucked up, but it really wasn't. Like the gist of the joke, I guess, is like with all the school shootings going on, like it makes me almost think like maybe black people gave up on segregation too soon. Like,
Right.
right? Like maybe we had it backwards the whole time. And I don't know, it's just kind of riffing on that idea.
Yeah.
But it's funny though, because that joke was very hit or miss, right? Like some audiences, if they sat and listened to it and like
Right.
they would be like, all right, and people would start dying. But some audiences, they would hear school shooting, they would hear segregation, and it was done. It didn't matter what I said after that, what the actual punchline was, whatever. They were just like, we're not laughing at that.
Yeah, you know, sometimes it could be funny, and people are afraid to laugh because they don't want people to judge them because they're laughing at it. And
yeah,
I'll tell you what, this has been my whole thing about. I'm not a fan of cancel culture. You know, I think if you tell a joke, I guess it depends on what your intention is. You know, if your intention is to make somebody laugh, then I guess I don't really have a problem with it. If your intention is to be mean, then maybe I have an issue with that. You know, what is your take on the whole cancel culture mob, Twitter mob?
So here's my thing. First of all, if your day job or what you spend your time doing is looking up tweets from 2009 to get somebody in trouble,
yeah. I
don't care if you're in the right. You're a lame. Like, I'm sorry. You're a lame for doing that. That's a lame thing to do, and I don't support that in general. Like, there's already enough fucked up shit in the world as it is. I don't think you have to go searching for fucked up shit. Like, fucked up shit finds you pretty easily. So I don't support that whole going back 12 years, because I'm like, listen, like if we start going back to 2009 for everything I did like 10 years ago, I don't know what I was liable to tweet back in college. I was drunk like 90% of the time, like whatever, right? So it's like there's that whole aspect of it. First of all, I think that's lame. And then the second part is people take what comics say so seriously. It's like, yeah, you guys are sitting here talking about what this comic said, but you don't care what this politician is doing with your actual money when it means something. So like if you're worried about what comics say, like your frustration, your anger is in the wrong places. Like because you canceled a comic. You canceled Shane Gillis. What did it change? What did you accomplish? He didn't get SNL. You got jack shit. Like or not. Like
yeah, I didn't get that whole thing because I listened to what he said and it just sounded like he was just trying to be, you know, say something funny.
That's all he was trying to do.
You know?
I've met Shane. I personally don't care. Like what he did. The problem with him though, he got isolated with the audio for like they clipped some audio of him doing like a super racist Asian accent.
Okay.
And then they got him with that. But then what Shane did was his apology was pretty half-assed. And if you're like trying to get into mainstream NBC where people are like that, then if you're gonna do that move, then you got to double down on that apology. You got to go all in, like a Drew Brees apology.
I'm not a fan of the apology.
See, and he didn't apologize, so that's why he lost SNL. But the irony is that he kind of got like a cult following of people that were like, "Fuck that," and so he's kind of done better now. He got more attention than he had before, so in the end, it kind of benefited him. So yeah, I just think that people who are like going out trying to find comics as like that's what you're doing to make the world, you're barking up the wrong tree. You're not.
I will say though, when Ari Shaffir did that video about Kobe, I was a little upset about that.
Oh, I heard about that.
I was legit brokenhearted about Kobe.
Well, I just think that's very tone deaf. Like, come on, man. Like, you can't do that, and especially the timing of he did. Like, I don't think making fun of I personally don't think it's funny to make fun of like I don't think it, and especially when it's that fresh, like that's a fresh wound to just be like picking. Like, I mean, honestly, if you want to like make fun of like Hitler, like okay, fine, I get it. Like, there's dead people, but like when something like that happens and there's a child involved in a tragic accident, and you're out there trying to be like funny on the back of that, that's not cool, man.
I've never understood that's the one thing about some comedians that I've never understood is the race to make the joke about someone who just died. I've never gotten that. I don't think I've ever laughed. I mean, I've never laughed. I guess the only person that ever made me laugh was when Jeselnik did the joke about it was the shooting in Aurora. When he goes, aside from that, how was the movie? And I thought it was funny. That was probably the only time I've ever laughed at something like that.
Well, see, I mean, that's also in better taste, I think, than what Ari Shaffir did. Because I don't think Ari Shafir's joke was that funny.
It wasn't funny. That's the thing.
It wasn't funny. Like, it wasn't. Like, it was like, dude, everyone, like, come on, bro. You know what I'm saying? Like, wouldn't he say like Kobe finally passed or something like that, or something like?
Yeah.
It was something lame like that, and it was like, that's not even like funny. That's not good. Like, at least Jesselnick's is funny.
Yeah, that's the thing that's making me that I was thinking about the other day, that Kobe Bryant died this year, and it's like the 15th most popular thing that happened this year. Like, no one even remembers. It feels like it happened 5 years ago.
It doesn't even. I honestly, now that you said that, I even forgot that it had happened this year. Like, I thought it was like it seems like it had been a lifetime ago because so much has happened, and it's only June.
What? It's unbelievable.
It's only June 2020. If I make it to 2021, I'm not wearing pants like ever. I'm business some top balls out. Like, I'm chilling in 2021. Whoever survives 2021, it's gonna be a free for all.
So what is your take on everything, going on right now with the protests, Facebook? I mean, what is your take? I mean, I'm sure you have a thoughtful opinion.
Well, so I do. I mean, there's a lot here. I think the biggest thing is that, one, we have to be very open and careful because there's a lot of different issues here that are at hand, and the one thing that I struggle with is, like, for me, I'm not like a big Facebook person. You're not going to see me drop a lot of posts, but when this stuff happened, I did decide to throw my.
I saw you engaging in like 10 arguments on. But discussions.
No, I did, because some of the times on Facebook, because I think recently I've always kind of just sat on the sidelines with this stuff. I've never really cared to like voice my opinion, and I kind of let it slide. But I think the combination of everybody just being kind of locked in and being able to see these things, and then these videos kind of happening, and then you have like Ahmaud Arbery coming out with one video, and I watched that video and I was like, whoa.
Yeah, that's a tough. That
was hard to watch, man. Like, I normally and I watch these things, and sometimes you become callous to it, like you see something and you don't even think about it, or you hear whatever. But like, watching that one, it was so cold and calculated. Like, somebody was there to record it. I don't know where you hang out, but how often is someone there just randomly to watch somebody get executed?
Right.
That didn't seem very random to me. So the fact that somebody there is recording it means that it was planned. Mean that you were like, hey, come record this. Mm-hmm. Like, that's the only way somebody catches that video the same way that person did.
Right.
So that's the first thing to me, is like that it was very calculated. And then you have the Breonna Taylor thing, which I don't know if people don't know about that. Breonna Taylor was she's an EMT. The a vice unit broke into her home, didn't announce themselves, and her boyfriend had a legally registered firearm. He thought someone was breaking in. He fires. They fire. They kill her in her bed like that. So that was like, man, that was fucked up. And then you had the George Floyd thing where the dude's just kneeling on the neck. And then you just watch all of these things, and it's like you just see them all at once. And I think with everything going on, and I was like, wow. So I think that was very powerful. And so I was like, okay. So I started seeing some things on Facebook that would kind of make me upset. I think a lot of people have opinions on these ideas, but they've never taken the time to really research what the issues are. You see the thing at hand, you're like, oh, we're going to talk about the rioting and the looting. And then the people will, and then you start asking them about it. And as you examine further, you start seeing that I don't think that a lot of people, their intentions, I don't think they've really thought into what their opinions are. They just say stuff because maybe that's what the people they follow is, or the news channels they watch. And this is on both sides, but I don't think a lot of people really understand the issues at heart here. And I think that was the biggest problem. And that's why I kind of jumped into some of those things. Because when you see somebody post something so just like, this is egregious, or this is a ridiculous sentiment, let me maybe try to drop it and drop some knowledge. But Facebook is not clearly the forum for that.
And it's tough. You know what? It's tough to do because it's really hard to have a thoughtful discussion on social media. Stuff's going to get lost in translation, or people aren't going to be able to hear exactly what you're thinking, right? And you can't really. I try to stay out of it you know, because
Right. I'm saying
I'd rather have that discussion face to face or in person. You know, because I have a lot of opinions too. My opinions change every day but one of the things that I definitely think is that I 100% blame the media for everything that happens. 100% blame the media. And I'll tell you why. And you can tell me if I'm wrong here.
okay, I'm intrigued. Let's see where this goes.
Let's just say for like 50 years or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
The media constantly plays videos of, you know, black men or whatever being violent on TV, right? And then they constantly play videos of police killing black people, right? If it's a white guy, you don't see that. And they constantly feed that narrative over and over again. So when they do meet in a situation that normally should be a fine situation, there's already a tension that's built from the media narrative for whatever reason. I don't know why they do it, because they want to have ratings, they want clicks, but I feel that they're building a tension that doesn't need to be there. And you can tell me if I'm wrong, right? I don't know. I mean, that's just from an outsider's point of view.
I will say, I mean, I will say that there's definitely truth in that. I wouldn't say that's 100% the issue. I do think media plays a part. I think the way that media covers crimes, the way that the difference in the ways that media, like there's all these things, and if you're looking for them, you can always find them, that shows like a similar stories in terms of like a white person does this,
right?
And they're like, oh, this person was fighting for their lives, so the black person does this.
Oh,
like,
yeah,
this criminal was looting, you know. So you have that thing, and that definitely helps increase the tension for sure. I do completely think that the messages that we show in our media of terms of people of color, black people in general, and we show that reactions, and it's not just the news, it's in you watch it on TV shows, and you see these movies, and these stereotypes are reinforced. So I think that's a big part of it. But I also think this is the thing that I think that a lot of people aren't really understanding about this thing, right? Is that this didn't happen overnight, right? This isn't something that, like, a lot of people act like because segregation was abolished in the South in the 1960s, that was a wrap. Racism, segregation, it's over. We're good, everybody. We nailed it. Yay. And that's not the case. Like, when you go back historically, right? Historically, like, the police originally, the police were invented in the South as slave catchers. That's what the police were. The police unions, the police force essentially were like random militia of white people that had the authority to go and catch slaves and physically harm them or do whatever they had to bring it back. So that's where the origination of police started in the United States. For the most part, in the North, it was to bring back property. And so it's very similar. So you already have that historical context. And now in the South, because the South never really, in the South, you ended slavery in the 1860s. You ended segregation in the 1960s. So for 100 years, these people were still so bitter. That is a hate that runs deep. That is a tension here that runs deep. And so now you look at that, now you build that up over time. And so even when you end segregation, things like that legally, there's still Jim Crow and other things that there's still these laws that are unspoken laws, but they're still there that kind of that permeate the society. So this is, I think, and that difference between the police and black people has been it's always been a volatile situation. Like, for now, people are like, oh, the protesting, why are they looting? Why are they rioting? This is so bad. Martin Luther King Jr. would never do this. And I hear people say that all the time. They're like, oh, why can't they be like MLK? A lot of people don't know that Martin Luther King Jr. was like the most hated man in America in his time. The FBI deemed him the most dangerous man to America. They tapped everything he did, watched all of his moves. His family won a civil lawsuit against the government that they had inside knowledge of his death before, and it was proved in court. So it's like, you guys say, the people say this now, but when he was doing it and their nonviolent protests, don't forget that you all chased him down with dogs, hosed him down, and then murdered him. But now you guys use him as the example for nonviolent protests, which I find hilariously ironic. But all that to say that this has been a long time building, and I don't think it's just like, oh, it's like I think there's a culture. This isn't just about like cancel people or white privilege or whatever. I think there's just it's kind of come to a head. when you can have people that were around in the 60s in the civil rights movement and you're watching black men get murdered then, and now it's 70 years later and you're still watching the same thing, it's like, this can't be right. Like, there's got to be some sort of difference and some sort of change. And I'm glad to see it coming this way. And I'm glad to see other parties get involved that are not just black people.
Yep. Okay. Do you think it's gotten worse, or do you think it's just filmed?
I don't see. That's the thing. I don't think it's gotten worse. I think now that like we catch it on camera which makes me realize like how many times did stuff like this happen when people were like, no one cared because there wasn't a camera. Like in the case of Ahmaud Arbery, this happened back in February.
Really, I didn't realize that.
So it was almost 3 months. And if you read the story, it was almost 3 months before the video came out, and it wasn't until the video came out that the DA even pressed charges. So much, not even arrested him, not even convicted him. They wouldn't even press charges. The DA recused himself. The second DA recused himself. And the third DA said there wasn't enough evidence to press charges, even though they had this possession of this video. So it's crazy to me that, like, I mean, if you want to say one thing, but not even pressing charges, not even any criminal activity whatsoever with that video out there like that, that's a problem. You can't tell me that, oh, it's just like a thing. Like, and that's not the only case. Like, you look at all these videos that come out and all these murders that come out, and you then look at all of the people that have been actually convicted of a crime in these cases. And you forget that those people in Atlanta weren't even cops. George Zimmerman wasn't even a cop. These are just normal people that have the ability to kill other black people, and everyone else is like, no, that's fine. And that's a scary prospect, I think, to have to live with every day for a portion of society.
Yeah, no, I could. Yeah, I mean, I can't even imagine. I know I've had incidents, getting pulled over where a cop was a dick to me or whatever. But I'm sure if I was a different color, maybe it's probably even worse.
I have some crazy stories, man. I do have some crazy stories of a traffic stop and getting a gun pointed to your head by a police officer. Like, so one time I was 15 years old, man. I'll never forget this. I was in Denver, Colorado. It was me, my cousin, and another player on our basketball team, a 6'9" black dude. My cousin had just got a car, put his license plate in the window. You could do that in Colorado back in the day.
Yeah.
We're driving to a basketball tournament. We're driving on the highway. We're going the speed limit in the right lane, 75 miles an hour. We're in the middle of nowhere. And all of a sudden, traffic slows down to like a hill. We're going like 60 miles an hour all of a sudden. The speed limit's 75. My cousin's like, that's weird. Everyone's in this lane going 60 miles an hour. Gets in the next lane. He drives straight, 75 miles an hour. He passes the line of people. At the front of that line is a cop, and he's going like 60 miles.
Oh, man. Yep.
So we get in front of the cop, and we keep driving the speed limit. Cop gets in the next lane, swerves out in front of us, cuts us off, starts going 60 miles an hour again. We're like, okay, we're trying to make it to a basketball tournament. We don't want to be late. We want to play. So we get over, we get in the next lane, we pass the cop, we exit. Never breaking the speed limit, mind you. So we get on an exit. The cop starts following us off the exit. He follows us. He pulls us over. Like, okay. And it's like, mind you, it's like 7 a.m, by the way. It's super early. We're going to a summer basketball tournament. So he pulls us over, and my cousin goes to the median. He goes to the median, which is in the middle of the road because there's like a ditch to the side of the road. So the cop comes over the window. First thing, he's just like, why'd you pull over to the median? Always pull over to the right. My cousin's like, there's a ditch. The road falls off. It's like, I don't care. Next time, pull in the ditch. So this is already from the jump. Right.
Yep.
So then he goes, he looks around. He's like, you guys been drinking? My cousin's like, he's like, what, drinking Gatorade? He's like, no, I smell alcohol. Like, it's 7 a.m, and we're going to play basketball. It's like, okay. And then he goes, you guys have ID on you? I'm like, what kind of ID? It's like, preferably ID to show you guys are legal citizens. Like, I got a school ID. I'm 15.
Right.
So we're like, okay. So he's like, okay. And he looks over. He's like, license and registration. So my cousin pulls out his license and registration. Now the guy sitting, so the vehicle registration was actually, my cousin pulls out his license. The vehicle registration is in an envelope, like under the seat or the bottom of the seat. My boy's 6'9" sitting in the front. Right. So he bends down to pick it up. There's a cop on the other passenger side window. All of a sudden, he's like, hey, no sudden movements. Pulls out a gun right there. Boom. We got this gun pointed in the car like that. And my friend's like, whoa, I'm just trying to grab the registration. Like, he's like, all right, keep your hands when I can see him. So he pulls down, he goes and grabs the registration, and he picks it up. And so he's like, okay, so this cop's still pointing the gun to the window. So the other cop takes it, goes to the car. He goes and starts typing in whatever, does what he's doing. He comes back a little bit later. And now as this is going on, probably like 3-4 more cop cars pull up. All of those cops get out of their car, right? So they come over and they pull my cousin out of the car, and now he's surrounded by like a handful of cops, and they start asking him. First, they put him up on the thing, pat him down. Then they like surround him and start asking him questions, doing whatever. I'm only in the back of the car, so I can see. I can only see what's happening. I can't hear what they're saying to him or anything like that. But I can see. But this other cop here, he's still right there with a gun pointed in the window, right? So we're sitting. So in the car while this is happening, we're sitting there waiting. We're just waiting, hanging out. My friend goes to grab a drink of Gatorade, and this cop flips out. He's like, I told you to keep your hands where I'm seeing me. Cocks his gun. He's like, if you move your hands one more time where I can't see him, I'm going to shoot everybody in this car. So now we're sitting in the car with our hands up.
Right.
I'm in the back seat, 15 years old. My friend's in the back, he's 17. So we're sitting in the car with our hands up like this. So we're sitting here just with our hands up, just watching my cousin around a bunch of cops. We see like players from our team drive by, and we talked to them later. They're like, yeah, we thought you guys were all going to jail. Like, we thought you guys were dead, blah, blah, blah. So that's for later. But yeah, so we're sitting in the car with our hands up. So finally they arrest my cousin, whatever. They bring him back in the car. The other cops go away. This cop comes back. He's like, hey, I see your license plate is in the window. My cousin's like, I'm sorry. I just literally picked it up this morning. We decided to drive up here. I'll put it on the car thing as soon as possible. Mind you, this is Colorado where people can drive with temp tags for 60 days.
Right.
So, and the cop's like, no, that's not good enough. I want you to put on this license plate right now. We're like, all right, we'll go to the nearest gas station and put on this license plate. Not a problem, officer. We're like, where's the nearest gas station? He's like, it's a couple miles. It's like 3 miles back that way. We're like, all right, we'll go there right now. He's like, I'm going to follow you guys to this gas station. And your friend here is going to hold this license plate out the window. If he puts this license plate inside the window, I will pull you guys over and arrest all of you guys. So we flipped the bitch on the highway, and my friend drove with the gas station 3 miles back, holding the license plate out the window. Cop followed us all the way to the gas station. He parked on the other side of the gas station. We went inside, got some screws and a screwdriver. He just watched us until we were about almost done putting it on, and he drove off. We never got a warning, never got a ticket, never got a citation, nothing. Just left just like that. And
that's incredible.
And then we went to the game, and everyone's like, oh, you guys made it. We thought you guys were getting arrested. We saw all those cop cars and all this stuff happen. Like, we thought you guys were done. And then, so yeah, and that's all that ever happened with that. And I remember at the time, I was just like, holy shit, like, we are still alive. Like, this is good. We didn't. And now, like, looking back, I'm like, man, that was messed up. Like, but when you're 15 years old, you don't know your rights. You don't know what you're possible to do. And these are police officers. There's people that are supposed to be looking out for your best interest, blah, blah, blah. And I remember telling one of my friends, his dad was like a court judge. He was a district judge in the Adams County where we lived. And I remember telling him, he's like, if everything is like ever like that, he's like, if you would have got their badge numbers, he's like, all of them would have been fired like that. But you don't know these things, you know, but that was like, that was just one experience. And there's other experiences like that. And the crazy part is like, I grew up, for all intents and purposes, I grew up in a very suburban area. You know, it was very, like, I didn't grow up in like the hood or anything like that. I grew up in a very suburban area. And I'm one of the black people like, oh, he's so well spoken, right? You know, like the one that's like, speak proper English, you know, they tell you that, right? Speak properly, wear your pants up high. I have a college degree, I got a good job. People act like just because you do those things that, oh, this can't happen to you. Like, do all those things and, oh, well, why are they committing crime? It's like, it doesn't mean anything. Whether you're making millions and doing this or you're poor, it's like, it's all the same. And that just goes to show that the way that the system is broken and the way that it treats people like that. And I think it's time. I think that's the biggest thing, is that's to change. And so, like, one of the things that people have been talking about is the defund the police thing has been big, right? Yeah. And it's funny because someone was talking about it. It's like, oh, what about this? And I was like, I realized in that moment, I have never, not one time in my life, ever dialed 911 for the police. Not one time. And it's crazy because I can't think of one single situation in my life where I was like, whew, I was happy the police were there. Not one single time. So I think our experiences with that are so different. And that's why I'm not surprised when people have different experiences, when people are like, oh, this is crazy or whatever, because their experience is so different. They couldn't even understand where somebody that's been through some of the things is coming from when they're like, fuck that. I would be perfectly fine if there was no police. Like, they couldn't understand that because they couldn't even imagine a world where they not able to call police.
Yeah, that is. I just had the cops on my house the other day, so I don't know.
Yeah. No, I'm not blaming. I'm not saying like this isn't to say like all white people are bad and like oh there's people that's all white people's fault that we're sucking. Like I don't. That's not what this is about. But like for example, so in the early 2000s, actually, this is a great example too because I think it's not talked about enough when we're talking about this. Camden, New Jersey, they used to have one of the highest murder rates or the highest murder rate in the United States, right?
Yeah.
So they did something very similar where they defunded the police.
I saw that.
Yeah. So they took away like the city police or whatever, made them all county police. But what and they were interviewing on NPR the police chief of the time, and he said what they did was they just took all the cops, and a lot of them ended up getting their jobs back. But what they did make them do was re-interview, make them take psych tests, and do other things, and check their records in terms of complaints and stuff like that to weed out some of these so-called bad apples. You know what I'm saying? So that's what they did, and but they ended up bringing a lot of the cops back. But what they did was, in terms of instead of being like, hey, we're here, like he's like, we used to try to fight, and this is the police chief talking. That was the police commissioner, like in chief of that department. He's like, we used to have a 14% solve rate for murders. He's like, we changed that the police department, and instead of going through like we're gonna be busting heads and trying to take drugs off the street and blah blah blah, he's like, we changed it to where we were like, hey, we want to have a presence in the community. And we was like, when we came back, he's like, we went out and we just showed people like, hey, we're here to help you. Because a lot of people act like when there's like a poor black area, like all the black people, like, yeah, we're trying to murder each other. It's like everyone wants to live just like you do. Just everyone's always like, what about Chicago? There's people in Chicago that don't like murders in Chicago. Like there's few people that are gangbangers and they're murdering, and people use that as a justification for allowing people to get murdered on video because black on black crime exists in Chicago, which I find it funny because that people even use the term. Anytime somebody says the term black on black crime, think about this. Most crime is intraracial. The United States is more segregated today than it was in the 1960s. So that means most crime happens within race. White people do crime on white people in over 80%. Black people, I think, is like 89%, and white people like 81%. No one ever says white on white crime. I've never heard one person say white on white crime. Why not? When most crimes are white on white. But
no, you're absolutely correct.
That same thing that you're talking about the media portrayal. You see, like those things. It's like, oh, so there's little things that do that. But back to the cop in the police chief in Camden, New Jersey, he was saying that their murder solve rate. He's like, afterwards, like we just try to have a presence in the community and show the people that we were there for them, and we weren't there to like bust you up or whatever. Like we're trying to like stop like bad things from actually happening. Their murder solve crime rate went from 14% to almost 70% in the span of like 2 years.
Wow.
And the only way that you solve murders like that are because you need the involvement of the people, but they earn the people's trust. And that's the biggest thing is if they don't trust you, no one's going to tell you anything. But the fact that they were able to change that solve murder rate like that drastically shows that then they were able to get information from the community because those people were willing to have once they started to trust the police in their area. And I think that's possible, but it's going to take a large change. I'm not saying get rid of the police. I mean, I personally don't plan on calling them any soon, but I understand they make people feel safe or whatever. Fine. But like he also talks about, we have police come and handle mental health issues. You have someone having a mental health issue and you bring the police. Someone has a mental health issue and you're bringing dudes with guns because that's going to make the situation better?
Right.
And I'm like, honestly, I don't think people go into police to do those kinds of things. That's not what they're trying to do. So why even make them do that?
I do wonder, like, and I have a lot of friends that are cops, and I know them as my friends, not as like cops, right? So I'm obviously think that they're great people, and I'm sure that they are. But I don't think I've ever been pulled over and the cop wasn't addicted to me. And I used to wonder, why is he so mad? I'm the one that's about to get a ticket. Like, why is he mad at me?
Well, I think it's police culture in general. It's a cultural thing for the police culture. I think the one thing about police, I think, is you have power, right? And like there's the saying, like power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely. And I think when there's not a lot of checks in terms of what people can do, they can be a dick. They can do whatever. They can try to incite you. there's actually a book that a former police officer wrote, and it's called How Not to Get Arrested. And in this book, he details like certain things that cops look for. And it's like a lot of police, when they pull you over, they do that to try to incite you to do something stupid, to say something, to try to swing, to try to push, to do something like that. Then boom, they got you. They can beat the shit out of you, arrest you, whatever, because you did that. And it's part of that thing. So so it makes sense that most of the time you get pulled over, a lot of the times they're being a dick to maybe get you to do something. I mean, I'm not going to say that all cops are bad. This isn't what those conversations about. I have had a cop pull me over that was like, you were speeding, please slow down, have a good night. That has happened.
Right.
But I also had a cop detain me and my friend that were both drinking and smoking weed and throw my head over the hood, let my friend drove home drunk and high, and not give him a ticket while they took me to detox and talk shit to me in the back of a cop car. Like, oh, you think you're so smart? You think you know it all? I have had those things happen. So it's not, I'm not going to sit here and say it's every cop, but I think there's a culture that when there are those cops that do those things because of the way the police force are, no one's trying to say anything about them. None of their colleagues are going to stand up for them. And that's a real problem. If you're an officer that wants to say something and you do, and you get shunned or you get a bad shift and people treat you differently or whatever they do to you. And I think that's a major problem with that.
Now, what do you think about going back to the George Floyd incident? I didn't realize this. 2 of the cops, it was their 3rd day on the job. And and it's like one of those things where, at first you're like, I think all 4 of them should go to jail the rest of, should go to jail the rest of their life. Like, should get death penalty. But then you think about like, the dichotomy between like, it's your 3rd day on the job and now you have a 19-year superior next to you. And are you going to step out of line? It's like one of those things where it's like, obviously they should have stopped it. But I mean, what do you think about that when you find out? Does that change your opinion at all?
Well, one, I didn't know that the other cops were only.
Yeah, it was it was a black cop and the white cop, the ones that were helping to pin him down.
Yeah.
And they had said, "Do you think we should turn him over?" And that's when the other cop said, "No." But it's their 3rd day, and you wonder, like, what were they thinking? Were they thinking, is it like training day? Like,
that's exactly what I was thinking. I was like, this is literally training day.
Yeah.
Great. I mean, here's the thing. And I understand that being a police officer is a very hard job, and I would not take that away from anybody. Right. But here's the thing, that it's like, if you are going to go to the academy and get the badge, then you also have to be able to handle the situations that come with that. That's a part of the job. Right. Like, everyone wants to be Tom Brady, but everyone wanted to be Michael Jordan, but no one wants to be Michael Jordan in the gym. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, that is a part of the job that it comes with. I think the other 3 cops should be charged with murder themselves. No, I don't think they should be charged with murder, but do I think they should be charged with something? Yes. I don't know legally enough what that is, but I think more so what this has to be is an example.
Yeah. Like,
it has to send a message that behavior cannot be tolerated and will not be accepted. And that also, like Martin Luther King Jr. said, that if you see something bad happen, if you see something and you do nothing idly by, you're just as guilty. And in a sense, that like the protecting other people and protecting, like, for example, the cop in Buffalo. You heard about what happened in Buffalo about the 75-year-old man?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he was like this old white guy. 2 cops shoved him down. The police report came out, said he fell. The video came out, we're like, ugh.
I know.
And then the 2 cops got suspended. The trippier part was that the 57 other cops that worked that emergency unit all resigned in solidarity. And that's the thing right there. I understand sticking together, but it's like, how is that detrimental when you see a cop do something that maybe you don't believe in, that you think is messed up, but you're not going to say anything? And that's the real problem with that, is that if you're in a place where it's so secluded like that where you can't speak up, and if you see something that you can't even acknowledge that it's messed up and there's no consequences for that action, that's unacceptable. And
now, have you seen the Daniel Shaver video at all?
The Daniel Shaver? I can't say I have.
No. That's probably the worst one that I think I've ever seen. I think.
Which one? Oh, is that recent or?
No, it was in Arizona, and it was I think it was a white guy and his girlfriend. They were drunk in a hotel.
Oh, he's the one in the shorts.
Yes,
I did.
That That the cop made up his mind that he was going to kill him.
Yeah,
He was looking for a reason to do it.
The directions he were giving him, his parents were. That whole thing was messed up. I remember that one, and that
Now,
one.
now you want to know the worst part about that story is that so the cop got acquitted, and he got fired. They rehired him, so he can get his pension.
See, and that's exactly the problem. You can't.
But here's the thing though. The media never talked about that story one time on the maybe for like a day. And why is that? Because they want people. I truly believe that the media wants to divide us. They want people bickering and fighting.
Well, that's also Joe Arpaio's Arizona. Are you surprised that they kept that under wraps?
Right.
Like, that's Joe Arpaio. That's Arizona. That's that time period, and they were like, "Nah, nip that in the bud." But those are the kind of things that's exactly what this is about. It's like that can't continue. You can't have an officer do that, get away scot-free, and keep his job and get his job back for a pension. That's unacceptable.
Right, I agree.
That's what this is really about. This isn't about. I don't care about people talking about white privilege, this white. No, that's not what this is about. This is about something that's been long overdue and is necessary for a change. I believe that it is time to reform that we have. And a lot of people say it can't work, but something needs to be done. And you see these things happen. And now that people are starting to be able to record everything, it seems like there's a new one every day. There's just another one tallied. There's another crazy video that you're watching, and you're just like, this can't. This is just
right.
I'm not gonna sit here and say like I'm afraid of the police, but I do every day or every time I see a cop and they're coming to pull me over. It's like, oh snap, here we go. Like, get ready. Like anytime police come around, it's like I do think I'm very conscious of that. It was a lot of the reasons why like I don't go out and drink at bars. Like the idea of me being drunk in public and what could possibly happen just because I'm fucked up, I can't take that chance. So I had to cut that out. Just little things like that that some people may not ever think about, but those are real things that a lot of people think about in terms of. I know a lot of kids, like a lot of my friends growing up, and even my parents, we weren't allowed to play with toy guns. Very simple thing. Cowboys and Indians, everyone had toys.
I don't let my kids either.
Yeah. No, I mean, and it's a thing, but yeah, there's a reason for that. But there's just little things that you may not even think about that some people have to think about every day. So it's those kinds of things that I think it's a lot of people have just, you get fed up, like James Baldwin in the 1950s. I don't know if you know who James Baldwin is.
No.
James Baldwin, he was like a prolific, he was an author and he was like a writer, speaker, and he was talking, this was back then. And he's like, people always say, he's like the moderate says like, oh, these things take time. And he's like, it took my grandfather's time. It took my nephew's time, my parents' time, my kids' time. How much more time is it going to take?
Right.
And that was like 70 years ago. Like for as much as things change, things don't change that much. Like, for example, even recently, people are like, well, why don't they get jobs and they vote and so on and so forth. A woman was in Atlanta. She went to voting in the side of like the poor side of town. It took her like hours to go through the voting booth. Went to the white side of Atlanta, people just walking in and out. But that's the kind of thing. Like voter suppression is a real thing. You talk about why people don't vote. People's votes have been silenced for so long they feel like they have no voice.
Right.
That's unacceptable. These are the things that I think have been happening for so long that no one's cared about. And this is the time where it's time to change those things. I don't think anyone should have their votes suppressed, and I don't think whole communities should have their votes suppressed, but that happens a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, so you and I might probably disagree about that stuff because I don't think that the Democrats or the Republicans give one shit about any of us. I think they care about
I absolutely agree.
I think they care about making their friends rich, but one thing.
No, we agree on that. I don't think either party gives a fuck about the people.
I didn't agree with the the looting on the small mom and pop shops because I don't think that they're the problem at all. I think that Wall Street's a problem. I think income inequality is a big problem. And I think that in order to solve, the systemic problem that we have in our culture, that we have to start with putting more small businesses in the communities, getting rid of these huge corporations that own everything and can literally lay off thousands of people whenever they want to, ruin their lives just so they can increase the share of their stock by a few dollars. And I really think that's going to be how we get rid of it. And I wish I was in charge of something because I'd be like, look, let's go to freaking Amazon headquarters. Let's go to Facebook HQ. Let's go to these headquarters and let them know that we're not going to spend money there anymore, and take them down. And that's how, hopefully we can rebuild a system that's fair for everybody.
Well, I do think income inequality is a huge thing, and I think that a lot of if you look back, like historically, right, capitalism and you look at like the income things, corporations and police have gone hand in hand. Like in the North, the first police station, the first police force in the North was actually in Boston. And they were put together to protect the property of companies that were bringing in product from the ships and bringing in, like, they had their warehouse and stuff, and that's what police were originally set to do here in the North in Boston, and so on and so forth. So they have kind of gone hand to hand as the guardians of that.
Yep.
I think the one thing about the looting that I find very strange is like you see pallets of bricks at places.
I've never seen a pallet of bricks in my life until this year.
Right. Who's bringing a pallet of bricks? I don't think the black people going to protest and their white friends that are there with them are bringing pallets of bricks to protest. But
I wouldn't even know where to buy them.
How do you even get it delivered? When you carried it with your friends?
Right.
No, we got it. Let me just put it on my shoulder.
Yeah.
Like, that's not how it works. So I think there is, and like if you read the biography of Malcolm X, the autobiography of Malcolm X, he actually talks about this. So what they used to do, like when they had riots back then, is they used to have agents that were undercover. So they'd get like black guys in the 60s and they'd like be part of the movement. And then when you had these riots or when you had these protests, everyone's being peaceful, but then you have a couple of people that just start some shit, and that's all it takes, because you have three different people at a riot. You have three different people at a protest, right? You have the protesters, right? These are the people that came out and they're like, we're here for a moment. We're going to be here non-peaceful. We bring signs. We bring chants. We brought food and water. We're here for the long haul, right? And this woman describes this on this video on Insta that went viral a little bit ago. She breaks it down perfectly. Then you have the rioters. Those are the people that are like, cool, I'm a part of it, but if shit goes down, I want to wild out. I'm just here for the ride and it's cool, whatever. And then you have the looters. Those are the people that are like, hey, shit might go down, and if there's an opportunity, I'm gonna take it. If people start wilding out and there's some fire in the streets and glass gets broken, I will risk hurting myself through these glass to crawl in these stores to get something however I can get it. Right? So you have those three different types of people. Do I think those looters make up a majority of the people that are protesting? Absolutely not. But the thing is, if you have a protest of 10,000 people, whatever, and you have a group of 10 people that decide they want to start a fight with some cops or want to start breaking some shit, how quick before it gets dark, people are getting involved, some people are trying to stop it, and then police are like, fuck it, we're beating everybody, and they have a right to, because so. It doesn't take much, and I think that's what gets lost in this. But anytime this stuff happens, I think that what you have to really think about, or what you really have to look about, is how did we get to the point where there were so people that were like, I will risk getting an ass whooping, cutting myself on glass to get whatever is in this moment. And how did we get to that point? And why are these people willing to risk so much and go through so much? Like, if nothing means something to them, then clearly something had to have caused this. Martin Luther King Jr. said himself, he said, the riot, the protest is the voice of the unheard. And I think a lot of people have felt unheard for so long, and then they just reached a boiling point, and that's what we're seeing here. So am I for rioting and looting small mom and pop businesses? No, I don't think that you should break your own property. Do I think that is all the protesters? No. Do I think a part of that is like police doing that so you can start gas masking and spraying that, and part of that? Absolutely. Do I think some people are there to take advantage? Absolutely. But will I say that that is the story and what we should be talking about? I think that once people get to the point of that, then you really have to be looking to how, if your life is so great and everything is going so perfect, I don't think you'd be out in the streets protesting. I don't think you'd be out rioting.
Right.
So I think that we have to look at the conditions that got us to this point and make a change there. And I think through that, we will see a stop of those things, and we'll see things move for the better. But if we just focus on, oh, there was looting, it's so bad, this is all bad, then we're missing the bigger picture and we're losing sight of what's really important in this. And I don't want to see that happen.
Yeah. I heard somebody, say something like that the protesters were acting like children, throwing a tantrum in the store because they want to get toys. And then my retort to that was, maybe they're abused children that are old enough to fight back now.
That's the thing. Hurt people hurt people. Nobody comes
Right.
like this overnight. Like no one just wakes up and is like, oh yeah, I love my job, my wife and my kids great. Let's go riot and loot some shit. Like that's not how we get to
Right.
this point. So I think that there is a bigger situation, and anyone who's not open to this idea, who's not open to the history, and who's not open to what's happening now and doesn't understand that, I think you will be on the wrong side of this when it moves. When you look back at this time in history, I think anyone who's for it is going to who's against this movement is going to be on the wrong side of history. I really do.
Yeah. I just hope that we can get rid of the income inequality. I think that's the.
Hey, I second that motion. Let's get. I think and I think it comes part in hand too, because in order to have, like, somebody was explaining like the concept of the difference of millionaires and billionaires. People, we just like the normal people, we like to lump them together, right? Like
Right.
millionaires, billionaires are all the same amount. But I'm like, and someone was explaining to me like the difference between a millionaire and a billionaire, right? Because you can become a millionaire becoming an athlete, an actor, a rapper, or whatever. You can become a millionaire by having a small business. So think about this. How many days is a million seconds, right? How many, if you had to guess, how many days is a million seconds?
Maybe like 100. I have no idea.
You're right.
Maybe
So
1,000?
right, yeah. So a million seconds is 12 days.
Okay. All right.
12 days, right? So now that you know that, a million seconds, 12 days.
Yeah.
How many would you guess is a billion seconds?
Like 120 days.
32 years.
Wow.
That's not even. Yeah, it's a big difference.
Really?
Yeah, exactly. 32 years. It's not even. So when you look at when you're talking about income inequality and you're looking at millionaires and you're looking at billionaires, they're not the same. Like,
Right.
and so that's why it frustrates me when I see stuff like there's a lockout and people are like, oh, these millionaires are so spoiled. These billionaires are the ones locking them out. They're the worst. Right. So I think so once we start looking at that, it's like, how do you become a billionaire and get billions of dollars without doing some pretty sketchy stuff? You can get paid $1 million, but if you're making billions, everything you're doing is not above board. But if you also look at the way that the SEC treats these corporations and the way that they can get off and the laws that they can do, there's more lobbyists in Washington than there is politicians. They have and you look at and it pays, because like if you look at recently, there was a bunch of government grants handed out before this COVID thing happened. And if you look back in even 2019, the companies that got the most government grants, they all had like the most lobbyists in Washington. And it's not a coincidence. I think the problem with the income inequality is because politicians got bought out by corporations, and corporations were like, hey, take this check and shut the fuck up and pass this. And because if you look at most politicians have like their platform that they run on, but if you look at their like laws that they've passed, it's usually like they're just supporting like one industry in their state or whatever that's really popular and supports their thing. That's what most politicians do. And I think you can never really truly get income. You can't fix income inequality until you separate that corporate and politics. Right now they're hand in hand. Do you know who doesn't have? If me and you find some information and we buy a stock, that's insider trading. We can get in trouble. Martha Stewart can go to jail for that. Politicians, no insider trading for politicians.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah. Like, how can you fix income inequality when they're the ones making the rules on what they're capable of doing?
Kelly LaFleur, who's a senator from California, maybe, she sold all of her positions and all of her stocks in February before the lockdown and moved it all to Zoom. Like, she just knew that we were going to go to teleconferencing.
She was right. No insider trading.
And they said it was a coincidence.
Exactly. You can do that. And it's like, how are you supposed to win as a normal person versus when that's who you're competing against in these markets? It's things like that. You can't. And that until that stops. But again, I think I think what's happening now is a step in the change of the power structure. Because I think right now police are kind of the villains, because they are essentially, I'm not going to say they're the protectors of corporations, but they've historically gone hand in hand.
Well, they are. But that was kind of what I've been saying for probably the past 3 weeks or whatever, was that fixing police brutality is kind of like going to the doctor for strep throat and them giving you cough drops. It's not the problem. It's the symptom of the problem.
Baby steps.
Right.
Baby
I
steps.
know. I want to tear it all down, man. I don't want to. I don't want to enter a Monopoly game where everyone owns all the properties already. I want a fair playing
Bro,
field.
it's funny that you bring that up because this woman made this post and she used that exact example. She's like, if you talk about the time that it takes to build wealth, it's like a lot of people like white people have been building wealth in America for 400 years. Like segregation was stopped 50 years ago, and then you had places like Tulsa, you've had places like Rosewood. I don't know if you know what those are.
Well, I know about Black. Are you talking about Black Wall Street?
Yeah, Black Wall Street was Tulsa.
Yeah. Okay.
And then there was another one called Rosewood that was a very similar situation. So you have all these things where it's hard for people to build. Not only is it already hard enough for them to build that, and then when they do, and it just gets torn down at no consequence to anybody.
Right.
And I think that and income inequality starts there, but because now anytime you start a business and it's like you can't compete against the businesses that are already entrenched. They just like, oh, you're starting this company. Let's start this law that stops you from growing past this thing, and then you get smaller. We buy you out. It's like they're it's too far gone. But I think once you start showing the politicians that hey, like this stuff can happen to you, and you start getting people that are able to. I think local politics is a lot bigger. I would say a lot of people always focus on the national election and like the presidential election. But if people really want to make a difference, and the reason why I think voter suppression is horrible is because if you're able to say, hey, city council person or senator in my town that's not serving the people, get them about the pain, then you can start making change because issues in your hometown, whether you want people to park or we want to put a park here or we want to fund this service, they're usually weaving between Democrat and Republican. So to just Republican, so to jump on one side of that is a silly thing. But if you get people that are in the best interest of your community when you vote in local elections, then you get what's best for your area. And I think that's really important. And that's why voter suppression is horrible because it stops from getting people in local elections, which I think are very important and people miss out on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, a lot of the elections I feel like here in Massachusetts it's only one person running.
Yeah, the incumbents. That's how most things are. They just run one time, and no one ever like opposes them, which is
interesting.
Yeah, well, and then that's because when you have no one opposing you and no one running against you, you get comfortable with there. You can start wheeling and dealing. You don't have to serve the people because you don't have a threat of not being voted in.
Right. Yeah, I don't know if I wonder if there's going to be a generation of people that are afraid to run because there's going to be like a million dick pics out there. If you're growing up in like the social media era,
bro, my dick is everywhere. Like, if someone recognizes me famously, they'll be like, no, I see his dick over there. Like, I got a dick pic too. I'll be like, shit, I'm not even trying to. I don't know where my dick's at, but I bet you if you
like 30 years, that's gonna be like one of the requisites to run. You're gonna have to just whip it out.
Just get it over now. Just get it out. Lay it on the table.
You don't have to search my Twitter. It's right here. Here it is.
I'm just gonna start putting my own dick pics out before the competition does.
Right.
I want to get out in front of this. So by the time the hackers leak my dick pics, they're already out. There was a time back in my 20s where I thought dick pics were cool.
Yeah. All right, Ben. Listen, when you think you're going on stage again? Do you have any shows lined up?
Not right now. I'm trying to get back on stage. I know some things are starting to open back up, so hopefully we can get something. But I don't have anything physical lined up yet. But people can check out the Lonely Man's podcast. That's the one we have on there.
Are you on YouTube? Are you streaming on YouTube anywhere?
Yeah, we stream on YouTube. We stream it on Spotify as well. We have it on Spotify. You can find us on Anchor. Find me on Instagram as well, Ben Bosunga on that as well. And I'm just hanging out. Hopefully we get back on stage and start cracking some jokes.
Yeah, man. I hope I get a chance to do a show you one night.
Hey, man. I hope so. I hope we can. Thank you for having me on, man. I had fun, and I'm glad we got to discuss some stuff. And thank you.
All right, thanks, Ben Bo, and we'll see you later.
Hey, for sure, man.
All right, take care.